Bam, bam, bam. I jerked awake, my heart pounding. Someone was at my front door. At midnight. That kind of knock. It's never good news. Not at my age. Could be the cops. Could be a neighbor in trouble. Or, knowing my past, maybe someone finally decided to settle an old score. I sat up, groaning as my aching knees protested. I wasn't exactly in peak shape anymore, unless peak shape meant round and cranky. Reaching for the baseball bat next to my bed, I muttered, "This better not be some punk selling me a subscription." Another bam. All right, I grumbled, shuffling to the door. I peeked through the peephole, and my breath caught in my throat. A tall man stood on my porch, his silver-streaked hair catching the dim glow of the streetlight. He looked familiar, too familiar. No way. I hadn't seen that face in 45 years. And back then it was smaller, weaker, and terrified of me. George Harris. The kid I used to torment. My grip tightened on the doorknob. I should have slammed the bolt shut. Pretended I wasn't home. But something in his posture, calm, patient, like he already knew I'd hesitate, made me turn the knob. The cold night air hit my skin as I faced him. He smiled. "Hey, Walter," he said, like we were old friends. I just stood there, gripping the doorframe. The last time I'd seen George Harris, he was a scrawny kid with bruised elbows and a too-big backpack. A kid who never fought back. A kid who flinched every time I walked by. Now, he was taller than me. Broader. Stronger. His suit was sharp, his stance confident. And me? I was just an old man standing in his slippers, gripping a bat like an idiot. I cleared my throat. "You want to come in?" He nodded. "Sure." I stepped aside, my stomach twisting as he walked into my mess of a living room. Crumpled newspapers covered the couch. A half-eaten sandwich sat aging on the coffee table like a science experiment. I caught George eyeing it. "Didn't exactly expect company," I muttered, tossing the sandwich in the trash. He just smiled, settling onto my recliner like he owned the place. Silence. I fidgeted. "Been a long time." 45 years, George said easily. I winced. Hearing it out loud made it sound even worse. A heavy pause. Then, like a dam breaking, my mind dragged me back to 1978. 1978 Eastbrook High School. George was the kind of kid that made guys like me look good. Scrawny. Bookish. Too quiet for his own good. The perfect target. And me? I was Walter Mitchell, big man on campus. Captain of the basketball team. The guy who ruled the hallways. Teachers looked the other way, and the other kids? They either feared me or followed me. George, though? He was easy. I shoved him into lockers. Knocked his books out of his hands. Once, just for fun, I locked him in a janitor's closet and left him there. But the worst? The swimming pool incident. One afternoon, George was standing near the pool, waiting for gym class to start. I, being the brilliant jackass I was, decided it'd be hilarious to give him a friendly shove. Problem was, George couldn't swim. He hit the water, flailing. I laughed at first. Everyone did. Until his thrashing slowed. Until his face slipped beneath the surface, and didn't come back up right away. Coach Reynolds dove in and pulled him out. George survived, but the look he gave me that day. Pure. Unfiltered. Fear. And something else. Resignation. Like he had already accepted that this was his life. I should have felt bad. But I didn't. Not then. Back to the present I swallowed hard, shaking off the memory. I cleared my throat. So I said, "Why are you here, George?" After all these years? George studied me for a moment. Then, to my shock, he smiled. "Relax, Walter. I'm not here to make you apologize." I tensed. "Then what do you want?" He took a deep breath. "I run a non-profit organization now. We help people who've been bullied, kids, adults, even seniors. Give them resources, support, a community." I frowned. "And what does that have to do with me?" George leaned forward. "I want you to help me run it." I choked on my own spit. "You want what?" George sat back, completely serious. "You heard me. I want you to work with me. Speak to people. Share your story. Help others learn from it." I let out a bark of laughter, half amused, half disbelieving. Let me get this straight, I said. You tracked me down, knocked on my door at midnight, and now you're asking me, the guy who bullied you mercilessly, to help you stop bullying? That's the idea, George said, calm as ever. I stared at him. This had to be some kind of joke. Some long, drawn-out revenge plan. Except his eyes told me he meant every word. And for the first time in decades, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long, long time. Guilt. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You want me to help stop bullying? I shook my head. George, I was the bully. What could I possibly offer? George didn't flinch. Perspective, he said simply. I stared at him. Perspective? You know why people bully, he continued. You know the mindset, the excuses, the justifications, and more than that, you know the guilt that comes later. I swallowed. Hard. I didn't like how easily he saw through me. Listen, I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm not exactly non-profit material, I muttered. Besides, people don't change just because someone tells them to. George chuckled. Yeah, I figured you'd say that. Then, without warning, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across my coffee table. I frowned. What's this? Just open it. I hesitated, then picked it up and tore it open. Inside was a letter and a photo. I glanced at the picture first. It was of a teenage boy, skinny, pale, eyes downcast. He looked too familiar. Not because I knew him personally, because I knew that expression. It was the same look George had back in high school. The look of someone who had given up. I turned to the letter. Dear Mr. Harris, thank you for talking to me last week. I don't think I've ever told anyone about what's been happening to me at school. I was scared. I thought maybe it was my fault. But you made me realize I don't have to feel that way. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't met you. Sincerely, Kevin. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around the paper. George's voice was steady. That kid was thinking about ending his life, Walter. Because of bullying. I looked up. You helped save him? I asked quietly. George nodded. I gave him a way out. A support system. People who understand. He let that sink in before adding, and you could do the same. I set the letter down, staring at the table. 1978 Eastbrook High School. Why don't you ever fight back, Harris? George was on the ground, his books scattered. My friends were laughing. I smirked down at him, waiting for a reaction. But George just looked at me. No anger. No hate. Just exhaustion. Like he had already given up. Like he had accepted that this was his life. For a split second, I remember feeling a strange, uncomfortable twist in my gut. And I ignored it. Back to the present, I rubbed my temples. I don't know George. I don't think people want to hear from an old man who spent his youth being a jerk. He supplied helpfully. I snorted. I was going to say a menace to society. But yeah, that works too. George smiled. That's exactly why they should hear from you. Because you changed. And if you can, maybe others can too. I stared at him, searching his face for resentment, for anger, for anything that would prove this was some kind of setup. But there was nothing. Just honesty. And somehow forgiveness. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. You're really not going to let this go, are you? George grinned. Nope. I grumbled under my breath, but I knew the decision had already been made. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to finally do something right. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing in front of a room full of high school students. I had no idea what I was doing here. George, of course, looked completely at ease. He introduced me like I was some kind of guest speaker, then stepped back, leaving me alone under the spotlight. I cleared my throat. Hey kids. Silence. A few skeptical looks. Great start. I glanced at George, who gave me a reassuring nod. I exhaled. All right, Mitchell. Just tell the truth. I'm going to be honest with you, I said. I never thought I'd be standing here, talking about bullying. Because for most of my life, I was the guy who made life miserable for kids like you. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I pressed on. I was the kind of kid who thought being feared meant being respected. That picking on the weak made me strong. And I told myself it was all just harmless fun. That it didn't really matter. I paused, swallowing. But it did matter. And I only realized that too late. The room was dead silent now. I took a deep breath. There's a kid out there right now who feels like their life isn't worth living because of what someone else says or does to them. I looked around, locking eyes with a few students. And there's also a kid out there, maybe one of you, who doesn't realize that what they're doing is pushing someone to the edge. I scanned the room. I can't change what I did, but I can use it to make sure someone else doesn't go through the same thing. I nodded toward George. That man right there? I made his life hell. And instead of hating me, he gave me a chance to fix what I broke. I crossed my arms. And if he can do that, then the least you can do is take a second to think about the way you treat people. Silence. Then applause. It started small, but then it grew. Some kids even stood up, clapping. A few teachers in the back looked downright moved. I turned to George, who was smiling. Told you so, his expression said. I huffed. Don't look so smug. He chuckled. Welcome to the team, Mitchell. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help but smile back. A month later, I got a letter. From Kevin. Mr. Mitchell, I heard your speech last week. I just wanted to say, it meant a lot. I didn't think people like you ever felt guilty about what they did. It makes me feel like maybe people can change. Thanks for sharing your story. I set the letter down, exhaling. For the first time in decades, I felt lighter. Maybe I'd never be able to erase what I did. But at least now, I had a chance to make sure it meant something. And that was enough.